The night that changed everything. The rain hammered the windshield of Michael Sanders' Range Rover, the wipers struggling to keep up with the relentless downpour. Streetlights cast fractured reflections on the wet asphalt, making the already treacherous roads even harder to navigate. Michael had spent the entire day at a high-stakes corporate meeting, negotiating deals worth millions of dollars. Yet, as he drove home, the excitement of his recent triumph felt hollow. His mind churned with thoughts of his relentless pursuit of success, wondering why it never seemed enough. The city streets were eerily deserted, save for the occasional flash of headlights passing in the opposite direction. As Michael turned down a quieter road, a flash of movement caught his eye. On the shoulder of the road, illuminated briefly by his headlights, was a small, huddled figure. He almost didn't stop. The rational side of him, honed by years of cold, calculated decision-making, told him to keep driving. The world was full of problems, and he couldn't solve them all. But something about that tiny figure, trembling in the rain, tugged at him. Against his better judgment, he slowed down and pulled over. Michael hesitated before stepping out of the car. The rain soaked through his tailored suit instantly, but he didn't care. As he approached, he saw that it was a little girl, no older than 7 or 8. She was crouched by the side of the road, clutching a tattered stuffed rabbit to her chest. Her clothes were drenched, and her bare feet were smeared with mud. "Hey," Michael called out over the roar of the rain. "Are you okay?" The girl flinched at the sound of his voice, her eyes wide with fear. She didn't answer, instead curling tighter around her stuffed toy. Michael knelt a few feet away, careful not to startle her. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly, trying to sound reassuring. "My name's Michael." "What's your name?" The girl didn't respond at first, her lips trembling as she shivered violently. Michael noticed how pale her skin was, how her small hands clung desperately to the rabbit as if it were the only thing anchoring her to this world. "Please," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Let me help you." After a long moment, she finally murmured, "Layla." Michael exhaled in relief. "Layla, where are your parents? Are they nearby?" Her expression darkened, and she shook her head. "I don't have any," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the rain. Michael's chest tightened. He glanced around, as if hoping someone would appear to claim her, but the street was empty. "You can't stay out here," he said. "You'll get sick. Come with me, I'll make sure you're safe." Layla looked at him warily, her eyes scanning his face as if trying to decide whether he was trustworthy. Finally, she nodded, clutching her rabbit tighter as she stood. Michael quickly shrugged off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. It dwarfed her tiny frame, but at least it provided some warmth. He opened the passenger door of his car and helped her climb in, careful not to overwhelm her. Once inside, he turned up the heat and handed her a blanket he kept in the back seat for emergencies. Layla wrapped herself in it, still trembling, but her breathing began to steady. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael offered her a small smile. "You're welcome." As he pulled back onto the road, Michael glanced at her from the corner of his eye. She sat rigidly, staring straight ahead, her wet hair plastered to her face. The stuffed rabbit in her arms looked like it had been through as much hardship as she had. Its fur was matted, one of its ears hung by a thread, and its once bright colors had faded to a dull gray. "Are you hungry?" Michael asked after a few minutes of silence. Layla hesitated before nodding. Michael pulled into a 24-hour diner a few blocks away. Inside, the warm air and smell of fried food enveloped them. Layla clung to his coat as they slid into a booth near the back. The waitress raised an eyebrow at their appearance but didn't say anything, quickly handing them menus. "Order whatever you want," Michael told her. Layla's eyes scanned the menu with uncertainty before she pointed to a grilled cheese sandwich and a bowl of tomato soup. Michael added a plate of fries and a milkshake to her order, thinking she could use the extra calories. As they waited for the food, he tried to learn more about her. "Do you have anyone I can call for you? A relative, maybe?" Layla shook her head. "It was just me and Grandma," she said quietly. She passed away a few months ago." Michael's heart sank. "I'm so sorry, Layla. Where have you been staying?" "Different places," she mumbled, avoiding his gaze. "Sometimes shelters. Sometimes outside." The thought of a child surviving on the streets alone was almost too much for Michael to process. He couldn't imagine the fear and hardship she must have endured. Their food arrived, and Layla ate cautiously at first, as if unsure if it was really hers. But as soon as she tasted the warm soup, her restraint crumbled. She devoured everything in front of her, barely pausing to breathe. Michael ordered her another milkshake, and this time, she smiled, a small, tentative smile that made his chest ache. As they left the diner, Michael made a decision. He couldn't just drop her off at a shelter and hope for the best. Layla needed stability, safety, and someone who cared about her. And though he had never considered himself the paternal type, Michael knew he couldn't walk away from her. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe," he told her as they drove back toward the city. "You don't have to worry anymore." Layla looked at him, her eyes wide with cautious hope. "Promise?" Michael nodded. "I promise." That night, as Layla curled up on the couch in his penthouse apartment, wrapped in a warm blanket, Michael sat in his office, staring out at the city lights. He had no idea what he was doing or how he was going to navigate this new responsibility. But as he thought about the little girl sleeping just a few rooms away, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. For once, his success didn't feel hollow. Helping Layla might not have been part of his life plan, but it felt like the most important thing he had ever done. A new beginning. The early morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Michael's penthouse, casting a warm glow over the sleek modern furniture. The storm from the previous night had left the city washed clean, as if nature itself had pressed the reset button. Michael stood by the kitchen counter, brewing a fresh pot of coffee. The rich aroma filled the air, but his thoughts weren't on the coffee, they were on the little girl sleeping on his couch. Layla. He glanced toward the living room, where Layla lay curled up beneath a thick blanket. Her matted hair fanned out on the pillow, and the stuffed rabbit she clung to looked as battle-worn as she did. Even in sleep, her face held a trace of weariness that no child should ever have to carry. Michael sighed, his chest tightening with a mix of concern and uncertainty. What was he doing? He was a corporate shark, a man who thrived on high-stakes deals and cutthroat negotiations. Raising a child, even temporarily, was completely out of his depth. And yet, he couldn't bring himself to send her back to the streets or a crowded shelter. The clatter of a chair being pushed back pulled him from his thoughts. Layla had woken up, rubbing her eyes groggily as she sat up. Her gaze darted around the unfamiliar space before landing on Michael. "Good morning," he said, keeping his tone light. "How'd you sleep?" Layla shrugged, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay. Hungry?" She nodded hesitantly. "Come on," Michael said, motioning for her to join him in the kitchen. "I make a mean breakfast." Layla shuffled over, still clutching her rabbit. Michael opened the fridge, pulling out eggs, milk, and bread. As he cracked the eggs into a bowl, he glanced at Layla, who was watching him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "You ever had French toast?" he asked. She shook her head. "Well, you're in for a treat." As he cooked, Layla's posture gradually relaxed. The smell of cinnamon and vanilla filled the kitchen, and for the first time, Michael saw a flicker of excitement in her eyes. He plated the golden slices of French toast and drizzled them with syrup before setting the plate in front of her. "Dig in," he said with a smile. Layla hesitated for a moment, as if unsure whether the food was really hers. Then she took a tentative bite. Her eyes widened, and she quickly took another, then another. "This is really good," she mumbled through a mouthful of toast. Michael chuckled. "Told you." They ate in comfortable silence, the tension between them slowly dissolving. Michael found himself marveling at how resilient she was. Despite everything she had been through, there was still a spark of innocence in her. After breakfast, Michael leaned back in his chair, studying her thoughtfully. "Layla, I need to ask you something. Do you have any other family? Anyone who can take care of you?" Layla's expression darkened, and she shook her head. "No. It was just me and Grandma. She got sick and she didn't come back." Michael's heart ached at the pain in her voice. He had lost his parents young, too, though he had been fortunate enough to be raised by loving grandparents. He knew what it was like to feel alone in the world. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "You must miss her a lot." Layla nodded, her eyes glistening. "She always told me to be brave." Michael felt a surge of determination. "You are brave, Layla. Braver than most adults I know." She looked down, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "What's gonna happen to me now?" Michael took a deep breath. He hadn't fully thought this through, but one thing was clear, he couldn't abandon her. "How about this, you stay with me for a little while until we figure things out. Sound good?" Layla's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," Michael said firmly. "But there are a few rules. First, no wandering off without telling me. And second, you've got to go to school." Layla wrinkled her nose. "School?" "Yep. Non-negotiable," Michael said with a grin. "Deal?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Deal." "Good. Now, let's get you some new clothes and stuff. That rabbit of yours could probably use a little TLC too." Layla's face lit up. "You think we can fix him?" "Absolutely," Michael said confidently. "We'll make him good as new." Later that day, they visited a department store. Layla clung to Michael's hand as they navigated the bustling aisles. He let her pick out clothes she liked, colorful dresses, sturdy sneakers, and even a warm coat for the colder months. At the toy section, she hesitated before shyly pointing to a sewing kit. "For my rabbit," she explained. Michael smiled. "Good thinking." As they checked out, the cashier gave Michael an approving glance. "You've got a great kid," she said. Michael's chest swelled with pride. "Yeah, I do." Back at the penthouse, Layla busied herself with mending her rabbit while Michael made calls to his legal team. Adopting Layla wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to fight for her. She deserved a stable, loving home, and he was determined to give it to her. Days turned into weeks, and Layla began to thrive. She enrolled in school, where her teachers quickly recognized her sharp mind and determination. Michael made it a point to be there for her. Attending parent-teacher conferences, helping with homework, and cheering her on at school events. For Michael, life took on a new meaning. His ruthless ambition in the business world was replaced by a fierce devotion to Layla. She had brought light into his life in a way he hadn't thought possible. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city skyline, Layla turned to him. "Michael?" "Yeah?" "Do you think Grandma would be proud of me?" Michael's throat tightened. "I know she would be. She'd be proud of both of us." Layla smiled, her eyes shimmering in the twilight. "Thanks for saving me." Michael reached over and ruffled her hair. "You saved me too, kiddo." As they watched the city lights flicker below, Michael felt a profound sense of gratitude. His life had taken an unexpected turn, but it was a turn he wouldn't trade for anything. Layla was his family now, and together, they were building a new beginning. Winds of change. The cool breeze rustled through the neatly trimmed hedges lining the courtyard of Layla's new school. Michael stood by the front steps, his hands in his pockets as he watched the children pour out of the building. The school bell had just rung, and laughter and chatter filled the air. Layla's first day had gone better than either of them had expected, but Michael couldn't shake his nerves. He scanned the crowd until he spotted her. Layla walked down the steps, her stuffed rabbit tucked securely under her arm, a confident bounce in her step. She looked so different from the shivering girl he had found on the roadside weeks ago. "Hey, how was it?" Michael asked as she approached. Layla grinned, her eyes sparkling. "It was cool. I made 2 friends, Mia and Jordan. And guess what? They have a rabbit too, only theirs is purple and sparkly." Michael chuckled. "Sounds fancy." "It is." She hugged her rabbit closer. "But I like mine better. He's been through a lot with me." Michael's chest tightened at her words. He was constantly reminded of how much Layla had endured in her short life. Yet, here she was, facing each day with courage and resilience. "Come on," he said, motioning toward the car. "Let's celebrate your first day with some ice cream." Layla's face lit up. "Yes. Can I get 2 scoops?" "2? You're aiming high, huh?" She giggled. "Please." "All right, 2 scoops it is." Later, at the ice cream parlor, Layla licked her double-scoop cone of strawberry and chocolate with delight. Michael sipped his black coffee, watching her with a mixture of pride and affection. "So, tell me more about school," Michael prompted. "What's your favorite subject so far?" "Art," Layla said without hesitation. "We got to paint whatever we wanted today. I painted a picture of Grandma." Michael's heart ached at the mention of her grandmother. "That sounds beautiful. I'm sure she'd love it." Layla nodded solemnly. "Yeah. I miss her, but I think she'd be happy that I'm okay now." "You are more than okay, Layla," Michael said firmly. "You're doing amazing." As they left the ice cream parlor, Michael's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It was his lawyer, Daniel Collins. "1SEC, Layla," he said, answering the call. "Daniel, what's up?" "We need to talk," Daniel said, his tone serious. "There's a complication with Layla's guardianship case." Michael's jaw tightened. "What kind of complication?" "I'd rather discuss it in person. Can you come by the office tomorrow?" Michael's stomach churned. "Yeah, I'll be there." As he hung up, Layla looked up at him, her brow furrowed. "Is everything okay?" "Just some business stuff," Michael said, forcing a smile. "Nothing for you to worry about." But inside, worry gnawed at him. He had promised Layla that she would have a safe and stable home, and he wasn't about to let bureaucracy get in the way of that promise. The next morning, Michael sat in Daniel's office, the polished oak desk between them gleaming under the soft lighting. Daniel, a sharp-dressed man with salt and pepper hair, leaned forward, his expression grim. "Here's the issue," Daniel began. "Because Layla doesn't have any living documented relatives and no prior legal guardianship arrangement, the state is questioning your suitability as her guardian." Michael's fists clenched. "I've been taking care of her. She's thriving. Why would that be a problem?" "You're a single man with no prior experience raising children," Daniel said delicately. "And your high-profile business lifestyle doesn't exactly scream stability." Michael's voice was cold. "So what are you saying? They want to take her away?" "It's possible," Daniel admitted. "But we're going to fight this. I've already filed an appeal, and will present evidence of the bond you've built with her. But you need to be prepared for a potential home visit and interviews with child services." Michael's heart pounded. He couldn't lose Layla. She was more than just a responsibility, she was family now. "I'll do whatever it takes," Michael said firmly. "Just tell me what I need to do." That evening, Michael sat down with Layla in the living room. The city lights twinkled beyond the window, but his mind was clouded with worry. Layla sensed something was wrong. "Michael?" she asked softly. "Are you mad at me?" His heart broke at the question. "No, sweetie. Never. Why would you think that?" "You're quiet," she said. "Like you're thinking about something bad." Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There's something I need to tell you. Some people from the state might come to talk to us. They just want to make sure you're safe and happy here." Layla's eyes widened with fear. "Are they going to take me away?" "No," Michael said firmly. "I won't let that happen. I promise." Layla hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. I trust you." Her simple declaration filled Michael with renewed determination. He wouldn't let her down. The next week was a whirlwind of preparations. Michael worked with Daniel to gather evidence of Layla's progress, from school reports to glowing testimonials from her teachers. He even arranged for a child psychologist to meet with Layla and provide a report on her emotional well-being. The day of the home visit arrived, and Michael dressed in a crisp shirt and slacks, determined to make a good impression. Layla wore a pretty blue dress, her rabbit freshly mended and clutched tightly in her arms. The caseworker, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Holloway, greeted them warmly. "Thank you for having me, Mr. Sanders." "Please, call me Michael," he said, shaking her hand. As Mrs. Holloway spoke with Layla, Michael watched anxiously from the kitchen. Layla was honest and heartfelt, describing how much she loved living with Michael and how safe she felt. Later, Mrs. Holloway spoke privately with Michael. "You've done an incredible job creating a stable environment for Layla," she said. "It's clear that she's thriving here. I'll submit my report recommending that she remain in your care." Relief washed over Michael. "Thank you," he said sincerely. As Mrs. Holloway left, Michael knelt down in front of Layla. "We did it," he said with a grin. Layla beamed. "I knew we would." That night, as they sat on the balcony watching the stars, Michael felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Layla had changed his life in ways he never expected, and he was ready to face whatever challenges came their way. "Michael?" Layla said softly. "Yeah. Thanks for keeping your promise." He smiled, his heart full. "Always, kiddo." Trials and triumphs. The morning sun painted the sky in hues of gold and rose as Michael sat at the breakfast table, sipping his coffee. Across from him, Layla meticulously spread peanut butter on her toast, her brows furrowed in concentration. Michael couldn't help but smile at how seriously she took even the smallest tasks. "Big plans for today, champ?" he asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Layla nodded. "Yep. We have a science project at school. We're building a volcano that erupts with lava made from baking soda and vinegar." Michael grinned. "Sounds messy. I like it." Layla giggled. "I'll try not to blow up the classroom." "That's all I ask," he said with a chuckle. As they finished breakfast, Michael's phone buzzed on the counter. The screen displayed an incoming call from Daniel. Michael's smile faded. "One SEC, Layla," he said, stepping into the hallway to take the call. "Daniel, what's up?" "Michael, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we hit a snag with the adoption paperwork," Daniel said grimly. Michael's jaw tightened. "What kind of snag?" "Layla's biological father has come forward." Michael's heart skipped a beat. "What? I thought he was out of the picture." "Apparently, he's back and claiming he wants custody," Daniel explained. "We need to prepare for a legal battle." Michael's mind raced. Layla had never mentioned her father, and from what little he knew, the man hadn't been part of her life for years. The idea of losing her to a stranger was unthinkable. Do we have a chance? Michael asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. We do, but it won't be easy, Daniel admitted. You need to be ready for court proceedings and possible interviews with Layla. Michael took a deep breath. I'm not giving up on her, Daniel. Tell me what I need to do. That evening, after Layla had finished her homework, Michael sat down with her on the couch. He knew he had to break the news gently. Layla, he began, there's something we need to talk about. She looked up from her sketchbook, her eyes curious. What is it? Michael hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. Your father has come back and wants to meet you. Layla's face paled. My father? Yeah, Michael said gently. I didn't even know he was around, but he's claiming he wants to be part of your life. Tears welled up in her eyes. I don't want to see him. He left me and Grandma. He didn't care about us. Michael's heart ached at her pain. Hey, he said softly, pulling her into a comforting hug. Nobody's going to force you to do anything you don't want to do. But we might have to talk to some people about it. I'll be right there with you the whole time. Layla sniffled, her voice trembling. You promise? I promise, Michael said firmly. The days that followed were tense. Meetings with lawyers, court filings, and interviews with social workers consumed Michael's time. Through it all, he remained steadfast, determined to protect Layla's happiness and stability. Layla, for her part, showed incredible strength. Despite the uncertainty, she continued to excel at school, impressing her teachers and making friends. Her art projects became more vibrant and expressive, a testament to her resilience. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling court session, Michael took Layla to the park to clear their minds. They sat on a bench overlooking the pond, watching ducks glide across the water. You know what I love about ducks? Layla said suddenly. Michael smiled. What's that? They look calm on the surface, but their feet are paddling really fast underneath, she said thoughtfully. Kind of like us right now. Michael chuckled. That's pretty wise, kiddo. Layla grinned. I've been hanging out with you too much. As they laughed together, Michael felt a renewed sense of hope. They were paddling hard, but they were moving forward. The court date arrived on a crisp autumn morning. Michael and Layla sat side by side in the courtroom, their lawyer Daniel at the table with them. Across the room sat Layla's biological father, a tall man with a weathered face and nervous demeanor. As the proceedings began, Michael listened intently as both sides presented their cases. The judge, a stern but fair woman, asked thoughtful questions, her gaze shifting between Michael, Layla, and her father. When it was Layla's turn to speak, she stood confidently, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. I love living with Michael, she said. He's always there for me, and he makes me feel safe and happy. My dad wasn't there when I needed him, but Michael was. He's my family now. Michael's throat tightened with emotion. Layla's words were simple but powerful, and they resonated deeply. The judge nodded thoughtfully. Thank you, Layla. You've been very brave. After a brief recess, the judge returned with her decision. Based on the evidence presented and the best interests of the child, I am granting permanent guardianship to Michael Sanders, she announced. Relief washed over Michael like a tidal wave. He reached for Layla's hand, squeezing it tightly. We did it, he whispered. Layla beamed. I knew we would. As they left the courtroom, Daniel clapped Michael on the back. Congratulations. You fought hard for her, and it paid off. Thanks, Daniel, Michael said sincerely. Outside, the autumn leaves swirled around them, golden and crimson in the crisp breeze. Layla looked up at Michael, her eyes filled with joy. So what now? She asked. Now, Michael said with a grin, we live our best lives. Layla laughed. Can we get pizza to celebrate? You read my mind, Michael said, slinging an arm around her shoulder. As they walked toward the car, Michael felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The journey had been challenging, but they had come through stronger and closer than ever. Layla was his daughter in every way that mattered, and together, they were ready to face whatever life had in store. A new chapter unfolds. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting golden rays across the city skyline as Michael and Layla returned from their celebratory pizza outing. The savory aroma of cheese and pepperoni still lingered in the air as Layla skipped ahead, her laughter echoing down the quiet street. Michael watched her with a smile. Seeing her happy, carefree, and unburdened made every battle worth it. She was no longer the frightened girl clutching a ragged toy, she was blooming, filled with confidence and joy. Michael. Layla called, spinning around with her arms wide. Come on, you're walking too slow. I'm just pacing myself, he teased. Not all of us have endless energy like you. She giggled. Maybe you should eat more pizza. It makes me faster. I'll keep that in mind, he said, shaking his head with amusement. As they reached their front door, Michael's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, an unknown number. Normally, he'd ignore it, but something compelled him to answer. Hello? Mr. Sanders, a woman's voice asked. Speaking. This is Dr. Elena Moore from the Foster Youth Advocacy Center, she said warmly. I'm calling about Layla. Michael's pulse quickened. Is there a problem? Not at all, Dr. Moore assured him. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We've reviewed her case and heard about your incredible commitment to her well-being. We'd like to invite you both to speak at an upcoming event celebrating adoption success stories. Michael hesitated. Public speaking wasn't exactly his forte. But when he glanced at Layla, who was now drawing chalk flowers on the driveway, he knew this was an opportunity to inspire others. When is it? He asked. 2 weeks from now, Dr. Moore said. I'll send you all the details. All right. We'll be there. Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Have a great evening. As Michael ended the call, Layla looked up from her artwork. Who was that? Someone from the Foster Youth Advocacy Center, Michael said. They want us to speak at an event about adoption. Layla's eyes widened. Me? Speak in front of people? Only if you want to, Michael said gently. No pressure. She bit her lip thoughtfully. Will you be up there with me? Absolutely, he promised. Okay, she said with a nod. I think I can do it. The next 2 weeks flew by in a whirlwind of preparation. Michael coached Layla on how to share her story confidently, while also preparing his own remarks. They practiced in the living room, sometimes bursting into fits of laughter when Layla tried to mimic Michael's serious tone. You sound like a robot, she teased one evening. Michael laughed. Thanks for the feedback, coach. On the day of the event, they arrived at the elegant conference hall filled with families, advocates, and social workers. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory, with banners reading, "Every child deserves a forever home." Layla clung to Michael's hand as they made their way to the front row. There are so many people, she whispered nervously. You've got this, Michael said reassuringly. Just speak from your heart. When their names were called, Michael and Layla walked onto the stage to applause. Layla's grip on his hand tightened, but he gave her a reassuring squeeze. Michael spoke first, recounting their journey with sincerity and gratitude. He highlighted Layla's resilience and the joy she had brought into his life. Then it was Layla's turn. She stepped up to the microphone, her voice trembling at first. Hi, I'm Layla, she began. When I first met Michael, I was really scared. I didn't think anyone would want me. But he showed me that I was important and loved. He made me feel like I belonged. Her voice grew steadier as she continued. Now, I'm happy and safe. And I just want other kids to know that there are people out there who care. You just have to believe it's possible. The audience erupted into applause, many wiping tears from their eyes. Michael felt a swell of pride as Layla beamed, her confidence shining through. As they left the stage, Dr. Moore approached them. That was beautiful, she said warmly. You've inspired so many people today. Layla smiled shyly. Thanks. You were amazing, Michael added, ruffling her hair. Does this mean I get extra pizza tonight? She asked with a mischievous grin. Michael laughed. You drive a hard bargain, kiddo. But yes, extra pizza it is. Later that evening, as they sat on the balcony sharing a pizza, Layla looked up at the stars. Michael? Yeah? Do you think Grandma is proud of me? Michael's heart ached with love. Absolutely. She's probably bragging to all the angels about how amazing you are. Layla smiled softly. I hope so. You've come so far, Layla, Michael said. And I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of you too, she said sincerely. You kept your promise. Michael's throat tightened. Always. As they sat together under the starlit sky, Michael knew that this was just the beginning of their journey. They had faced countless challenges, but love, resilience, and hope had carried them through. And whatever the future held, they would face it together, stronger, wiser, and forever bound by the unbreakable bond of family. The full circle of gratitude. The winter chill nipped at the city as Michael and Layla walked through the bustling downtown streets. Festive lights twinkled from shop windows, and the scent of roasted chestnuts wafted through the air. Layla tugged at Michael's hand, her face lit with excitement. Come on, Michael. The ice rink's this way, she said, practically skipping ahead. Slow down, speed racer, Michael chuckled. I'm not as young as you are. She grinned mischievously. You're not that old. They reached the city's Central Park, where a massive ice rink had been set up. Families and friends glided across the ice, their laughter blending with the joyful holiday music. Michael laced up his skates, wobbling slightly as he stood. I should have stretched first, he muttered. Layla giggled. You'll be fine. Just follow my lead. They stepped onto the ice, and true to her word, Layla guided him with confidence. Michael stumbled a few times but managed to stay upright. You're a natural, Michael. Layla teased. Natural disaster, maybe, he joked, earning a fit of giggles from her. As they skated together, Michael couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. Layla was radiant, her laughter infectious. She had blossomed into a remarkable young girl filled with courage and love. After an hour of skating, they sat on a bench to catch their breath. Layla's cheeks were rosy from the cold, and her eyes sparkled with joy. That was fun, she said, untying her skates. It sure was, Michael agreed. You're a good teacher. Thanks, she said proudly. As they walked back to the car, Michael's phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at it, a reminder for a charity gala hosted by the Foster Youth Advocacy Center. Layla, how would you feel about going to a fancy gala tomorrow night? He asked. She wrinkled her nose. Do I have to wear a dress? Michael laughed. Only if you want to. I guess it could be fun, she conceded. Will there be food? Lots of it, he promised. Then I'm in, she declared. The next evening, they arrived at the grand ballroom, where crystal chandeliers cast shimmering light across the elegant space. Layla looked adorable in a navy blue dress with silver sparkles, while Michael opted for a sleek black suit. You clean up nice, Layla teased. Right back at you, kiddo, Michael said with a grin. As they mingled with guests, familiar faces greeted them warmly. Dr. Moore approached, her smile bright. "Michael, Layla, so glad you could make it," she said. "You both look fantastic." "Thanks for inviting us," Michael said. "Actually," Dr. Moore said, "there's a surprise for you tonight. Don't go anywhere." Michael and Layla exchanged curious glances as Dr. Moore disappeared into the crowd. Later in the evening, the room quieted as Dr. Moore took the stage. "Good evening, everyone," she began. "Tonight, we celebrate not just the work we've done but the incredible stories of resilience and love that inspire us all. One story, in particular, stands out, the journey of Michael Sanders and Layla." Applause erupted as Michael and Layla exchanged surprised looks. "Michael showed us what it means to fight for love and family," Dr. Moore continued. "And Layla's courage reminds us that even the darkest chapters can lead to beautiful new beginnings." The audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Layla's eyes widened with astonishment. "Is this really happening?" she whispered. "Looks like it," Michael said, equally stunned. As they made their way to the stage, Layla held Michael's hand tightly. Dr. Moore presented them with a plaque that read, "For exemplifying the power of love and resilience." "Do you want to say something?" Dr. Moore asked. Layla nodded shyly. She took the microphone, her voice steady despite the crowd. "I just want to say thank you," she said. "Michael changed my life, and I'm really happy he never gave up on me. I love him a lot." The room filled with cheers and applause. Michael's heart swelled with pride as he took the microphone. "Layla changed my life too," he said. "She taught me what it means to love unconditionally and to never stop fighting for what matters. I'm the lucky one here." Tears glistened in the eyes of many in the audience as they returned to their seats. As the gala wound down, Michael and Layla stood on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Tonight was amazing," Layla said softly. "It really was," Michael agreed. Layla looked up at him, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think we'll keep having adventures?" Michael smiled. "I have no doubt about that. Life with you is always an adventure." She grinned. "Good. I like it that way." As they stood there, Michael felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Their journey had been filled with challenges, but love had guided them through every twist and turn. And as they looked toward the future, Michael knew one thing for certain: they were unstoppable together.